It's fascinating how religions, especially ancient ones, often interact and overlap in ways that reflect the deeper cultural and spiritual currents of their time. Take Buddhism and Hinduism, for example, two of the world's most influential traditions that have shaped much of South Asia's philosophical and religious landscape. While they started in different periods and with distinct doctrines, there's an interesting convergence, particularly with how Hinduism has come to view Buddha not as a rival figure, but as an avatar of one of its major deities, Vishnu. When I first encountered this concept, it seemed odd at first glance, as Buddhism and Hinduism appear to have opposing ideas in many ways. Buddhism famously rejects the caste system and focuses on the individual's path to enlightenment, while Hinduism has an intricate cosmology, gods, and rituals that play out on a much broader, almost eternal scale. Yet, as I learned more, it became clear that this synthesis of Buddha into Hinduism as one of Vishnu's incarnations isn't just about religious dogma. It reflects something much deeper about the nature of belief and adaptation in human culture. You see, religions aren't static. They evolve, particularly when they're in close proximity to each other. In ancient India, these two traditions weren't isolated entities. They were part of a larger dynamic conversation about the meaning of life, the nature of the universe, and how to achieve spiritual liberation. The idea of Buddha as an avatar of Vishnu, which emerges in texts like the Bhagavata Purana, illustrates how Hinduism sought to incorporate what it saw as valuable from other traditions into its worldview. It's almost like a mutual exchange. Hinduism absorbed elements of Buddhism, while Buddhism, in turn, was influenced by the Vedic traditions that predated it. From a broader perspective, this integration speaks to how humans tend to approach complex, metaphysical questions. Instead of rigidly holding on to one set of beliefs, people have often been willing to adapt, borrow, and blend ideas when they find resonance with their own experiences and cultural needs. This was especially true in ancient India, where religious identity was fluid and ideas about divinity and salvation were continually reinterpreted. I think what this example highlights for me is that belief systems, even ones that seem fixed, are actually quite flexible. It's not about competing for who has the right version of truth, but about how those truths are expressed in different ways, depending on the historical and cultural context. By recognizing Buddha as an avatar of Vishnu, Hinduism didn't just absorb Buddhism into its fold, it acknowledged the wisdom and transformative power of the Buddha's teachings while placing them within its own cosmology. There's something deeply human about this process. It's as if by creating a space for Buddha within the Hindu tradition, ancient believers were also making room for the possibility that wisdom and spiritual insight could come from different paths, yet still lead to the same ultimate goal, liberation. And in that, there's a lesson for all of us today, no matter what belief system we follow. Hinduism adapted Buddhist concepts while still maintaining its own theological framework, the avataric concept in Hinduism. The concept of an avatar, or avatara, is central to Hindu theology, particularly in relation to Vishnu, one of the principal deities of the religion. Vishnu is often regarded as the preserver and protector of the universe, who descends to earth in various forms to restore cosmic order. These incarnations or avatars appear at different points in time to combat evil and protect righteousness, often taking forms that are relevant to the particular context of the time. In Hindu texts, there are traditionally 10 major avatars of Vishnu, collectively referred to as the Dasavatara. These incarnations range from mythical animal forms like Matsya, the fish, and Varaha, the boar, to revered human figures like Rama and Krishna. Each avatar embodies a specific mission related to the circumstances of the era in which they appear. Within this framework, the Buddha is considered the 9th avatar of Vishnu, an inclusion that adds a fascinating dimension to the interaction between Hinduism and Buddhism. Buddha as the 9th avatara, evidence from the Bhagavata Purana. One of the most important texts supporting the idea that Buddha is an incarnation of Vishnu is the Bhagavata Purana, also known as Srimad Bhagavatam, a revered text in the Vaishnava tradition of Hinduism. This scripture provides a detailed account of Vishnu's 10 avatars and explicitly names Buddha as one of them. According to the Bhagavata Purana, Vishnu incarnated as Buddha to curb the animal sacrifices that had become rampant in Indian society, particularly in Vedic rituals. In Hindu society during ancient times, ritual sacrifices were an integral part of religious practice, believed to ensure cosmic balance and favor from the gods. However, over time, these sacrifices, especially the slaughter of animals, began to be perceived as excessive and morally questionable. The Bhagavata Purana recounts that Buddha appeared during this period to teach a path of compassion, nonviolence, and morality, thus encouraging people to abandon animal sacrifices and adopt more peaceful and ethical practices. In this narrative, Buddha's message was seen as necessary to restore order and guide people away from harmful rituals. This portrayal of Buddha as a divine reformer who redirects society towards greater compassion highlights how Hinduism embraced Buddha's ethical teachings while integrating him into its own theological framework. Yet, this representation differs significantly from how Buddha is viewed within Buddhism itself, where he is seen not as a divine figure, but as an enlightened human who discovered the path to liberation through his own efforts. Dasavatara and the role of Buddha in Hindu theology. The concept of the Dasavatara, the 10 principal avatars of Vishnu, is one of the most prominent theological constructs in Hinduism. This sequence of avatars symbolizes the divine intervention of Vishnu in human affairs to maintain the cosmic balance between good and evil. The avatars are often seen as progressively evolving in complexity, moving from primitive, animal-like forms to highly developed human forms, each addressing the specific needs of the world at that time. The inclusion of Buddha in this list is especially intriguing because it demonstrates Hinduism's ability to absorb elements from external traditions, including Buddhism. Buddha's role as the 9th avatar of Vishnu is distinct from other incarnations, as it emphasizes a moral and philosophical reformation rather than the direct destruction of demonic forces, which is the case in many of Vishnu's other incarnations. In many retellings of the Dasavatara, Buddha is depicted as a compassionate and wise figure who guides humanity towards a more ethical way of living. His presence in the list underscores the importance of nonviolence, ahimsa, and compassion, karuna, within Hindu thought, virtues that are also central to Buddhism. However, it is important to note that this version of Buddha in Hindu theology does not necessarily correspond to the historical Buddha as understood in Buddhist tradition, where the focus is on personal enlightenment and the cessation of suffering through the 4 noble truths and the Eightfold Path. Cultural interactions and historical context. The inclusion of Buddha in the Hindu pantheon as an avatar of Vishnu is also a reflection of the rich cultural and religious exchange between Hinduism and Buddhism in ancient India. Both religions originated in the Indian subcontinent and have coexisted for millennia, influencing each other in various ways. While Buddhism emerged as a distinct tradition based on the teachings of Siddhartha Gautama, Buddha, it developed in a context heavily shaped by Vedic and later Hindu religious ideas. During the time of Buddha, Hindu society was characterized by rigid social structures, particularly the caste system, and religious practices that often emphasized ritual sacrifice and adherence to hierarchical norms. Buddha's teachings offered an alternative to this system, focusing on individual spiritual development, ethical living, and the rejection of ritualism. His critique of the Vedic rituals, especially animal sacrifices, resonated with many who were disillusioned with the formalism of the Brahmanical priesthood. However, as Buddhism spread and became a major religious force in India, it inevitably interacted with the existing Hindu tradition. Over time, elements of Buddhist philosophy, such as the emphasis on compassion and the rejection of ritual sacrifices, were absorbed into Hindu thought. The integration of Buddha into the Hindu pantheon can be seen as part of this process of religious synthesis, where Hinduism adapted Buddhist concepts while still maintaining its own theological framework. Buddha's position in the Hindu pantheon, a syncretic approach. The inclusion of Buddha as an avatar of Vishnu reflects the syncretic tendencies of Hinduism, which has historically absorbed diverse religious figures and ideas into its expansive cosmology. This is not unique to Buddha. Other figures from different traditions, including local deities and even figures from other religions, have been integrated into Hinduism's complex and multifaceted belief system. By recognizing Buddha as an avatar of Vishnu, Hinduism acknowledges the significance of his teachings while placing them within a broader divine narrative. In this way, the ethical and philosophical contributions of Buddhism are not rejected, but rather incorporated into the Hindu worldview. However, this also results in a reinterpretation of Buddha's teachings, aligning them more closely with Hindu principles and theological constructs. Diverging perspectives, Hinduism and Buddhism. While Hinduism's recognition of Buddha as an avatar of Vishnu is an example of religious inclusivity, it is important to recognize the significant differences between how Buddha is perceived in Hinduism and Buddhism. In Buddhism, Siddhartha Gautama is not regarded as a god or divine incarnation, but as a human being who attained enlightenment through his own efforts. His teachings are focused on practical methods for overcoming suffering and attaining liberation, nirvana, rather than on divine intervention or worship of gods. In contrast, the portrayal of Buddha as an avatar of Vishnu in Hinduism places him within a framework of divine agency, where he is seen as part of a cosmic plan orchestrated by Vishnu. This theological shift reflects the different emphases of the two religions. Hinduism's focus on the role of gods and avatars in maintaining cosmic order versus Buddhism's emphasis on self-reliance and the direct experience of enlightenment. The portrayal of Buddha as an avatar of Vishnu in Hinduism is a fascinating example of how religious traditions can intersect and influence each other. While Buddhism and Hinduism maintain distinct theological frameworks, the inclusion of Buddha in the Hindu pantheon as the ninth avatar of Vishnu demonstrates the fluidity and adaptability of religious ideas in ancient India. This synthesis reflects the broader cultural and historical context in which these two religions developed, where ideas about morality, compassion, and spiritual practice were shared and reinterpreted across traditions. The recognition of Buddha as an avatar underscores the ability of Hinduism to integrate diverse philosophical teachings into its own cosmology, while simultaneously maintaining its distinct religious identity. At the same time, it highlights the ongoing dialogue between Hinduism and Buddhism, a dialogue that has shaped the spiritual and cultural landscape of India for centuries.